Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigrea Gardenia. So, or as they say in Italian, allora. If you've ever been to Italy, you've probably heard that word 1,001 times. It's like the Italians' favorite word. Allora. So I've been thinking a lot lately, and as I was putting together this episode, I was trying to, every time I sit here and I think, what is the topic that is kind of most important to talk about right now? And it's it's a challenging moment to even discover your own thoughts. In other words, the world feels a little loud. Loud. That's the only word that keeps coming to my mind. It's like it's louder than usual. One minute you're kind of scrolling past climate doom headlines. The next you're in a room full of people and everybody is like going and your social battery is slowly diminishing or discharging. It's really tempting to look at the world through the lens of anxiety and think to yourself, why should I even bother? Like, why should I bother sharing my gifts right now? Why should I bother putting myself out there? It's just better to keep everything kind of sitting on a little shelf until things settle down. I hear this over and over again from my clients and my friends that they just kind of feel like right now there's just so much that their own voice is just a drop in the bucket. So what's the point? And every time they're talking to me about this, I get this picture of little seed packets, right? So everybody putting all their gifts, like taking a little packet out and putting all your gifts, which are these seeds of potential, and then you close them up. It reminds me of a good friend of mine who used to do a lot of seed swapping. She still does, actually, and I love it. I remember I used to help her sometimes, like she would collect all these seeds from her food forest and we would put them in these little envelopes and she would mail them out to other people. And I can imagine people receiving these, and each one of those seeds is filled with this, unexpected, unknown potential, this gift that you have. And then they just put them up on a shelf. And I feel like tons of people are doing that with themselves right now. They're taking all of their abilities and their skills and their talents and the things that they want to achieve and accomplish in the world. And they're saying, you know what, the world is so loud right now and there's so much going on and not all of it is so beautiful. I'm just going to throw it inside of this little seed packet and I'm going to put it there. And it's safe, sure, but it's also never becoming whatever it is that those seeds are supposed to become, whether that be a forest or individual plants or whatever it might be. And it's funny because recently I've tried to sow a few seeds, and as I've been noodling around on this topic, and a lot of them haven't come up. But I think it's not because anything is wrong with the seeds, but it's more like my mind has been looking at this through that metaphor. And then all of a sudden I have this one pot that I threw a few little seeds in, and boom, everything just started to explode. And I was sitting there looking at the two pots, thinking about the one that I put in as I was kind of focusing on all of these doom and gloom situations. And then I was looking at the one that I sowed with just, I don't know, it was enthusiasm and excitement. They're wildflowers, so I wasn't even really sure what was going to come up. And I put them on a pot and just kind of just said, do your thing. And it reminds me that plants really show us another path, right? A seed has to leave the cupboard at some point. In the wild, they don't even get a chance to hide in the cupboard, right? No matter how impossible the location may seem, whether it's a busy city street or a super dense forest, flowers go to seed, right? They fly, they jump, they explode out into the world, and they dive into dark, unfamiliar soil, kind of oftentimes having to deal with a lot of obstacles along the way. And while it's true that some never make it to soil, or some actually come into soil and then don't germinate, hence the pot that didn't germinate, at the end, some will find that teeny tiny patch surrounded sometimes by concrete and rock and every single obstacle that you can imagine for yourself when you're thinking about your own talents. And even though they have the tiniest chance of success, that moisture in that ground will soften the shell that once seemed super hard and impenetrable, and something will sprout, or someone in this case will sprout. And all of this, like softening of the shell and sprouting and like starting off new, all starts in the darkness, right? Where even the fear that comes with the unknowing, with the whole, like, this is an unknown beginning. I don't know what I have. I don't know what's going to come up when I start to emerge. I don't know what direction I'm going to be able to grow in. I don't know any of these types of things, but that's all part of the recipe, right? That's all exactly how plants exists, right? Seeds must enter into the dark, even though it's unfamiliar, even though kin don't know what obstacles they might face in order to germinate. It's a part of the process. The unknowing, the unknown conditions, the not really sure what you're going to find is all. So today we're going to be talking about how to treat our fears and all of our shadowy type traits the way a good gardener treats compost, with curiosity, with oxygen, and with just enough watery emotions. Every time I say water, think emotions, to wake up that hidden potential. And we're going to look at simple ways to water your anxiety. Kind of a little play on words there, to really look at how to work through your self-doubt and even all of the dread, whether it's climate dread, social dread, political dread, all kinds of dreads that you're experiencing, to start feeding your creativity instead of rotting on the shelf, instead of having something about yourself and having these beautiful, amazing gifts that you contain, that you are kind of put away for safekeeping for a rainy day, where we are in the rainy day, right? We want your skills to emerge. So in episode 115, we're going to explore how to plant your hidden seeds, turning fear into fertile soil. And if that sounds like a conversation that you want to have, something that you've really been craving, then stick around, because we're going to open up this cupboard. We're going to roll up our sleeves. I always have to remember to do that because I often wear long sleeves and then I go outside to like deal things in the garden. It's like, oh, roll up your sleeves and we're going to get your seeds, all of these talents and these skills and these characteristics that you've been hiding into the shadows, putting up into the cupboards, trying to say you will use them for a rainy day. We're going to put these in the soil. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. Okay, so as I was organizing up my thoughts around this, my outline, I kind of identified a few big areas that I want to talk about with you today. First of all, I really want to talk about the idea of fear as an unplanted potential. And this is about kind of looking at your shadowy parts again. We're going to be, over the next few episodes, really looking at a bigger picture, both light and darkness relating and connected to you. So in this case, we're going to be talking about things like anxiety and self-doubt and anger, these things that we tend to think about as weeds that we want to yank out. But we know that weeds really are wild plants. They're nutrient rich, they're dense, they have so many beautiful properties, and they're just waiting to feed on new growth. They're waiting to help us explore and nourish different aspects of ourselves. We're also going to talk about, as I talk about all the time, the ecosystem principle. I mean, my kind of centerpiece is the idea that you are a living ecosystem, and I want you to have that living ecosystem within you and without you, right? I'm going to slow down because, as you can see, I keep jumbling words, and I jumble words because I'm excited. And so as I'm excited, I start to speak faster. Can you tell that these are like those topics? The idea that you have things that you are not sharing with the world, parts of you that you're not, I'm getting emotional, parts of you that are not sharing in the world that you keep hiding away on a shelf, thinking that the perfect time is going to arrive, is like, oh my goodness, it touches me, and I don't want you to ever. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. Hopefully, you'll understand. See, it's all those places where the words don't really come. So, my point being, as I was talking about an ecosystem and the fact that when you're in an ecosystem, right, a forest, nothing is wasted, right? Dead fall feeds the mycelium, and in your personal living ecosystem, your uncomfortable emotions can feed creativity and purpose and relational depth. So I really want to emphasize and go deeper into this concept. Also, the fact that you're moving from isolation to germination, right? The idea that a seed needs contact with soil and waters and microbes and other kinds of nourishment, all of these relationships. And not only does the seed need to have them, the seed needs to recognize them, because it's not enough to just put a seed into the soil. We've all put seeds into the soil that haven't grown because that seed doesn't receive or doesn't recognize the things around that are most important. And this happens to a lot of us. We tend to find ourselves in isolation where we're really alone, not because there's no one around, but because we isolate ourselves away from what's there. So we're going to explore through some little micro practices that help you move out of the fear of the mental isolation and into relational flow. And this is an important aspect of, not only do we have to create relationships, but we have to recognize the relationships that are around us and how we can best make use of them, because not all of them are crystal clear. And oftentimes society has taught us that these relationships are bad and these are good, when in reality, everything can be useful if you put it into the right context. The other thing I want to talk about a lot is this whole daily seasonal cycles that we have. We have many different cycles, and you have a rhythm, and you need to start experimenting with that rhythm, like my morning creation, my evening strategy, my monthly rhythm. This is all about showing you how to honor your personal cycles, because this is another way to get out of the anxiety and the fear and all these different aspects. Because I'm oftentimes feeling anxious when I'm trying to do something in a time that's not right for my body, that's not right for my mind, it's not right for the way I do things. And so I go into overload, I go into overwhelm, and therefore the anxiety hits. Or even the idea that I have to do something. I used to get super anxious when I first moved to Dom and her about meal times. For the longest time, for the first maybe 2 months that I lived here, I didn't eat with the family because my body, as you've heard me talk, I have body dysmorphia. So at the time I was, kind of in a stability period, but it's very easy to go outside of that stability period. Back then, it was really easy for that to happen. And the concept of having to be forced to eat at a certain time, because that was the rhythm of this place, and also constrained to eat what was being prepared, because again, that's the way that the system was working, was really anxious, like would create a lot of anxiety inside of me. And I had to come to terms with it, I had to go through it, and I had to experience it and then learn to vocalize it. And it's still taken me years to try to explain to people that what here is very common and normal, especially in an Italian culture, of when we sit down to eat, is not the same for other places and for people who have different kinds of situations relating to and around food. It's not very healthy. And I had come from a long period of experimentation where I knew my body and I knew when and what to eat. So we're going to get farther into these details, because I think it's a really important thing, because when you honor your personal cycle, then you turn overwhelm into something that's dependable, like a dependable momentum that pushes you forward. And then the other thing is about, I want to work on how we prepare the bed. If you think about it from a garden perspective, how do I prepare my garden bed for eventual shadow work? Why is it that meeting your fears with unconditional curiosity and with unconditional love really helps us move towards it? And I have a new live workshop series, Reconnect with Plantkin, that I'm working on, that is specifically to work on this. How do we work on different aspects using small lessons connected to the plant, daily practices, and a whole series of other pieces. So I'm going to talk about that really in detail. Basically, by the end of this episode, my wish is super, super simple. I want you to feel your fear shift from this kind of locked cupboard where everything is kind of kept safe by isolating it and putting it aside and not touching it, to a rich, earthy compost in which you can pull those seeds out and look at them and identify which ones are the ones that I want to plant now. And I really want you to be able to leave this episode with at least one small practice to start planting those hidden seeds today, right? How do you take your gifts and your talents and pieces of you that you've been hiding away and start to give them life, to nourish them, to allow them to germinate in their own time? And if this conversation sparks a yes in your body, right? If a yes, this is what I want to invite you to join me for that first workshop of Reconnect. Actually, the next one, because by the time this comes out, it'll probably be the second one of Reconnect with Plant Kin, which I am planning on doing it around plant guided shadow work and how do you integrate the parts that you've tried to prune away. All of the details will be in the show notes and the description, so don't worry about it. And because all of this is because the world really doesn't need any more stored potential. It doesn't need any just something that's hidden away for safe. It needs your seeds in the ground, germinating, intertwining, feeding the wider ecosystem that we're all a part of. So, are we ready for all of it? Great. Let's take, oh, wait. First, I want to invite you to connect with one of my eco-conscious business partners. When you support them, you support the germination of more intentional business all around the world. If you're ready to elevate your podcasting game, Zencastr is the way to go. I love how easy it is. You just log in through your browser and start recording high-quality sound and video with your guest. No more technical headaches. I've got peace of mind knowing that Zencastr's multi-layered backup ensures my sessions are always secure, even if my connection gets a little wobbly, which often happens living in the mountains. And let's be real, who hasn't worried about how they sound? Zencastr's post-production magic helps me achieve the perfect podcast loudness, and cutting out background noise is just a click away. But what I love most is that Zencastr is an all-in-one platform. No more juggling multiple tools and services. With Zencastr, I create, produce, and distribute my podcast to Spotify and Apple and other major platforms, all in one place. So join me to make your podcasting journey effortless and enjoyable. Go to tigriagardenia.com/Zencastr to get my coupon code NCC Sprout, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same experience as I do for all of my podcasting needs. And it's time to share your story. Okay, let's really get deeper into all of this because there's just so many things I want to say. And I mean, yeah, I could probably go on for hours about this. And if you do want to go on for hours in the sense of if you want to have fruitful conversations where we explore and we look at solutions, please come into the Naturally Conscious community because that's really the place where we are having this, through our in-depth discussions and our random posts to be able to explore new thoughts and things that are coming out and all of the different programs that we have going on in there. So, but for a moment, I want to meet fear in its native habitat, right? I want you to just close your eyes. Well, unless you're driving. If you're listening to this while you're driving, please don't close your eyes. But if you can, close your eyes. And if you can't, just concentrate on the road and let that be a similar feeling. And I just want you to feel the kind of cool air that's around your face, right? Imagine that in your hands, you're holding a tiny paper packet. And what's inside? Well, every idea you've ever set aside because the timing felt wrong. Every idea, every talent, every part of yourself that you said, not now. So you have taken this and you've put them in this cupboard where they're going to be safe and out of sight and out of mind. And I just want you for a second to picture this, to feel it. What did it feel like to put it away? Did you put it away knowing when you would use it? Did you put it away and then forget about it? Out of sight, out of mind? Did you instead put it away just out of fear and you have no idea when you will ever pull it out or even if you will ever pull it out? Just sit with that for a second and that feeling. In episode 86, we talked about how our shadow personalities, the traits we hide, are often the richest compost, the most nourishing parts of ourselves. And so I want you to really think about this from the perspective of, what if all of those hidden talents, all of those ideas that you put up on the shelf, were actually the most enriching parts of the ecosystem, the life you're trying to live? What if in there, in that seed packet, is the piece that will all of a sudden connect everything that you're looking at right now? For me, ambition, for example, has always been a shadow trait, or at least it used to be. No one in my family was really ambitious, so it wasn't encouraged. It wasn't even modeled. I didn't have a good marker for it. I mean, I had some people around me who were successful, but not necessarily ambitious in a good way. Like, they weren't striving to be better. My first relationship my first relationships, actually, through my 20s, all of the people were more successful and had ambition to become someone. They were musicians, or they were superstars in their work, especially when I started working in technology. And it's, these were all people that had a vision, a dream, you might say, and they were actively working. So I just naturally fit into being their support system. I didn't have my own kind of big dream. I didn't have the thing I wanted to become. I had tried lots of different pieces, but I again, nobody in my family had ever kind of said, I want to be this. And so therefore, I just didn't have that as a model, and nobody even encouraged me to do that. And so much so, I became the support system, that the reason I eventually left Real Networks back when the company was just like on its heyday was because my partner at the time became my boss. And since he was on track to become, the general manager, and eventually the manager of our entire department, and eventually a VP, I got sidelined into a group that wasn't working on something I was particularly interested in. I mean, because I was trying to support his career and not come into his way. And at the time, the company wasn't that large, and other groups I didn't really fit into. So I got put into this like little group. Great people, by the way. Super loved working with these people. But the product we were working on, totally outside of my wheel well. And so it was the only way I could stay in the company, but I couldn't take on any role of importance, because as my partner, and eventually who became my husband, um, he would always be kind of above me, because he was the superstar with the ambition, with all these different pieces. So eventually I ended up leaving. Now, mind you, I ended up at Microsoft, which was great. So that's another story. And I had another piece there. But over and over again, every time I would take a step into the spotlight slowly, and my ambition would kind of try to get some space, someone would come into my life that wanted to be on that same stage, or wanted to be on a stage that was very similar. And I would just step back into the backstage area. I even went from co-owning a circus to being the backstage manager for Cirque du Soleil, which sounds like a step up for you, because, and I can understand that, because, here you go from like this tiny little group that I was working with a bunch of crazy carnies, and, to being on the road with Cirque du Soleil. But the truth of the matter is that I, at the time, had a production company that I was running. I was doing some really amazing shows with like 2,000 people. I was, up, going slowly up and growing this company from nothing. And I left all of that because I wanted to support, at the time, my partner's big dream to be a circus tech. And that was what he wanted. So I made myself of service to him. I literally, and I have a podcast episode where I talked about this, all the things that I did in order to create the environment so that he could get this job for Cirque. So my ambition kept getting pushed back into the shadows, or it would be used in service of somebody else. So rather than using and being ambitious for myself, I would take the energy that I would have used for me ambitiously and put it into that person. And it wasn't until probably my 40s that I finally went down into the darkness of my own self to understand where this ambition was. So much so that in Dom and Her, we have this thing called one of the bodies. It's one of the four main bodies of Dominher is called the Tecnarcato. It's the last body that came online and one of the most important. This body is the one that's dedicated to personal development, because remember, in Dominher, everything is done for in the collective perspective. And so, you first create your spiritual path, and then you have all of the collective rituals and the collective work we do, and you live in community, and you're doing all these things, and you're changing constantly with the game of life. But at some point, you got to look at yourself, because you are an individual inside of that collective, right? I have to be the best me in order to put that step forward. And so the Tecnarcato was a reminder that you don't disappear inside of the collective. On the contrary, your individual presence is super, super important in order for the collective to be able to accomplish its greater goals. And as part of the process, at the very beginning, you write something called a personal law. And I went back and I was looking for it, because I remember that my personal law, as I was preparing this episode, was connected to this whole thing. And my personal law, which I wrote back in 2013, so this tells you how long it took me to finally get into that ambition. And by the way, by this point, I was already working with a plant. So you can already tell who was kicking my butt into this, because it was connected to music. And even though this particular law doesn't say it out loud, but I actually am a singer. I don't talk about it a lot, because again, it's that whole ambition that I hide and that creative side that I hide. But my principal instrument at the very end of my college career went from piano to voice. And I sang, and I really never allowed myself the ambition of putting myself up on that stage in that way. Even when I got into all of the performing arts and to my production company, all of that was as a result of the fact that I was first hired as a performer in a type of performance that then connected me and started my spiritual reawakening and a whole set of processes, which one day we'll talk about it. I'll tell you all about it. But the point being is that I actually always would start on the stage and then would get pushed behind it. So my personal law, which I wrote in 2013, was: I have the courage to nurture my creative and artistic side in the arts and express them freely in Dominher and in my work. I have the strength to launch myself into roles instead of always remaining behind the scenes. Isn't that amazing? Like, that was my personal law. And that was around the time where, sitting in the Sacred Woods Temple, I realized that all characteristics, all traits, all talents, all these things that I had been pushing down, that I had been saying were wrong about me, all of these things that said I could never be on stage because I have to support others, because I'm not allowed to show these parts of me, because I'm not capable of dealing with this aspect, because I'm a bad at blah, 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 or whatever, insert your favorite thing there. That was around the time that I realized that was all bullshit. Like, in an ecosystem, everything is useful when you find its place, when you know how to use it, and when you know how much of it to use. Fear isn't a weed. It's unplanted nitrogen, right? It's something that gives you energy. When we bury it, when we actually like seed it into the ground, it feeds new growth. And I had to seed my ambition. I had to let my ambition and trust that my ambition could come from a place of positivity, a place of sharing, of a desire to be where I am right now, to share wisdom and teaching and grow and co-create with you. Because I even struggle nowadays. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. So if you were ever to look at my old stuff, I use the word teacher a lot. I don't really use teacher. I use mentor, I use coach, but I also use facilitator, I use co-creator, because I can teach you some stuff. And I love teaching. But in my teaching, I learn just as much. And so when I started to plant these talents of myself that allowed me to go up on the stage, that allowed me to be the center point and to trust that I was going to do it from a beautiful place of co-creation, my world started to open. And this is that ecosystem principle I was talking about, right? In a living forest, nothing is wasted. Nothing. And so again, when I was sitting in the Sacred Woods Temple and I was looking out, and I was realizing that there is nothing in here that gets wasted, nothing in here that gets put into a corner and no organism wants to touch it. Everything does. And our emotions, our uncomfortable emotions, even can have the same role, right? Waste or a difficult experience becomes a nourishment for something or someone else. And so, if we keep all of that in circulation, if our uncomfortable emotions become talking points, become fuel for something, become a learning experience, they get composted or evolved, reused, moved around instead of sealing them into emotional landfills, then all of a sudden you have this extra bout of nourishment. I was just writing a post today about something, and I put an expression down about, like, giving, how was it that I put it? It was something like sit next to a plant. I was putting together a little exercise, and I was thinking about it, sitting next to a plant and then dumping all of your stuff into that plant. And I was remembering when I was in Australia many years ago, I was teaching a class there, and one of the women was talking about how she has a tree that she loves, this tree friend that lives right outside of her front door. And she always goes, before going into her house, especially on days where she's had a really rough day, she goes to the tree friend first and she dumps all her shit. And she says at first she felt bad, like, oh my God, it's kind of like when you're talking to a friend and you just dump all your shit onto your friend. And your friend at first is like, what am I supposed to do with all that? But if your friend thinks about themselves as a tree, what is fertilizer? Fertilizer is made out of shit. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I could say it kind of more politely, but it's really made out of shit. It's made out of a bunch of nourishment and nutrients that are inside of shit. And so when you dump that onto a plant, when you don't do it from the perspective of, I'm giving it to you, as in like, oh my God, deal with it. But instead, I'm thinking of, hey, I'm having this experience, these uncomfortable emotions, this stuff, and I want to push it out there because I feel like you can help me recycle it, filter it, use it, experience it. It becomes a co-creative process, right? Your wounds, whether you're talking about social anxiety or rage at climate inaction or grief over even old systems that are going down, feeds someone when it's composed into and it's composted into a story or art or activism or even a softer form of listening. If you come at it from the aggressive, deal with it, you're wrong type of thing, sure, that's not going to be super healthy. But when instead it becomes a opening for expression and processing, and especially co-processing, right? It has this opportunity to become something that gives space for something bigger, or it becomes a piece of a puzzle that someone else can interact with. So the next time a painful memory flares, picture it more like a falling branch, right? It's falling branch, and ask yourself, who or what could grow if I keep this in circulation instead of locking it off in emotional concrete, right? So think about it from the perspective of like a nurse log, right? A plant, a tree that falls over, a branch that falls on the ground, and all of a sudden decomposers and insects and other kinds of beings, create little holes in it and become home, and it becomes food. And as the bark slowly decomposes, all of a sudden all these other nutrients are lashed is me mixing languages, just so you know, are left behind, because thinking of rilasciare, like you're just mixing in languages there. But the point being is that rather than putting it into an emotional concrete or trying to put it into this theoretical dump that doesn't exist, because the dump just ends up being inside of you and just fills up and fills up, let it continue to circulate. So if you think about it for a second, let one, just for a second, right? Let one of your dead branches come to your mind, something that maybe was an experience that failed, or a time when you tried to put yourself out there and something happened, a rejection email, a harsh feedback or criticism. And now for a second, picture a beetle chewing away at it, turning it into fertilizer for something larger for you. Just picture it. Hear the little beetle, Imagine that beetle in there saying, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much for giving this to me. Like I can get fed and I'm going to create something that someone else can use, whether it's you or someone else." Isn't that beautiful? Right? When you really allow yourself to just be in that, imagine that beetle just getting all this nourishment and food. I imagine like a little chubby beetle that's like, oh my God, this is so good. And then pooping out something and someone else coming around going, oh my God, that's so useful. And, it's just this whole little forest. This is how my mind works. Okay. I see all of my emotions kind of like this, like all these little insects and plants and birds and all kinds of other animals. And, it's great. So let's stay with the image for a second. Let's stay specifically, actually, let's go back to the seed image, right, that we had. And let's zoom in on it. If you remember in episode 77, when I was talking about growing in towards the darkness, I told the story of the Monstera, how much Monstera plants love the dark. That behavior is called scototropism, right? Growing towards darkness. So you can anchor and find moisture and then lift yourself from there into the light. And there are a number of different plants that really exhibit a lot of scototropism. And scototropism is, again, another one of those areas that in the human mind, we've been thinking about it as bad, right? Why would I ever grow towards the dark? If we think about dark spaces, it's often an area of evil or something bad could happen. It's unsafe. When in reality, a darkness can be, I mean, if you've ever had a migraine, you know how wonderful the darkness is, right? The idea of I sit there, or if you just need a moment of safety and you pull a blanket over your head and you just sit in there all cuddled up and warm. And, if you can do it with somebody else, that's great too. But even by yourself, it's freaking awesome. And so growing towards the darkness can be a place for you to find a new anchor inside yourself, for you to find where the moisture is, where are your emotions, how do you process through them, navigate through them, maybe even find new emotions in there, in that watery part of ourselves. And then once we feel stable again, and once we feel like we found what we need, we can use that as an anchor to push us towards other areas of light, always remembering that the darkness is there for us. Because we humans really try the opposite. We keep our hard feelings sort of in the mental spotlight. We think we're supposed to have them all lit up, analyzing them alone and with a big flashlight. I can just picture the flashlight going through my mind, rather than letting everything kind of sink in, because germination, like scototropism, needs those relationships. And sometimes those relationships are soil particles and mycorrhizal whispers and bacterial hugs and root supports. They're things that just hang out in the dark. So yes, the light can be really useful, as I was talking about sharing around, but that beetle doesn't always eat that dead branch from the outside where it's in the middle of the light. The beetle will bury into and eat from the inside because it's safe, because it's cozy, because the tender parts are inside there. And that eating is a way of processing and of recycling and of moving things through. And so, we have to be able to be flexible to play around in this light and this darkness, and recognize the times where things like phototropism are going to be important, moving towards the light, or even heliotropism, which is literally moving towards the sunlight, which is a slightly different light. And again, another episode that I'm going to have to do at some point, versus scototropism, the idea that I really need to just bury into the darkness because that's what's better for me. So let's do a 60-second kind of soil check. Okay. I want you to name a current fear. Like this could be something soft, just out loud to yourself, but just give it a name, right? Whatever fear you might have, think of it as one of those seeds that you're putting into the packet and you're like putting up on the shelf. It could be, I don't know, the fear of writing a piece that you post that is your strong political views, or it could be the fear of taking on a leadership role in the organization that you're on, of putting yourself up for a promotion. It could be the fear of starting your own business, or of going to somebody. I did something super fearful talking about the whole singing thing. And to be honest, I did it. And that was already a first step. And then I finally got feedback back on it. And now it's the next step that I have to do, which is still scary, which is I reached out to a good friend of mine who plays the bass guitar. And him and another friend of mine from here, from Dom and Her, have been like jamming out. One plays guitar and the other one plays bass. And I reached out to them and I said, hey, do you guys have anybody who sings? And they're like, nope. And I was like, well, would you be open to like having me come now every once in a while and sing with you? And he's like, sure. So he sent me a series of songs, which I haven't even looked at, to be honest, yet. But I'm excited because that was a big step for me, like to potentially put myself out there as a singer again, to take that stage. I mean, it's been years since I sing. I could suck. I mean, I don't have a beautiful voice, just so you know. I have a trained voice. I always said that because I have people who have beautiful natural voices. I don't have that. I have somebody who's trained and spent, years learning techniques in order to be able to sing, and who does a lot of singing in her car with musicals, because I love, 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 love musicals. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. So I want you to just name a current fear that you have, just out loud to yourself. And I want you to place your hand on the floor with the palm facing down to the earth. Just feel, it doesn't matter what kind of floor you have. It doesn't matter if you're indoors or outdoors for right now. Obviously, if you can go outside, it'd be great. But if you can't, don't worry about it. Everything is still somehow connected to the earth. And ask yourself, what connection does this fear need right now? Water, fungus, fellow seeds, maybe an element. What is the support that this fear needs? Or what is the inspiration this fear needs? What does this fear need right now? And breathe into that answer. Whatever may come, don't censor it. Just let it come. It might come in images. It might come in feelings. It might come in memories. Let it come however it may come. When I first did this exercise, my fear of being judged for wanting to share my message in the spotlight, obviously I was thinking a lot about this whole ambition thing, but that thing came wiping, like whipped back up for a second. And the answer, I remember, because it popped back up in the past, in the sense that it came back up as the memory of like what was really holding me back. And the answer was, this kind of sound really strange, but you know me, and I say strange things, right? Compost peers. Let me explain this. Okay. So when I first started to step into the light a little bit and kind of move, this was years ago when I finally eventually left one of my partners and ended up, because my first foray before ever started to do it here in 2013, my first foray into this was when I was still back in Seattle, and I was working in tech, and I was, some opportunities were coming in front of me. And I realized that I didn't have an ecosystem of support around me. I had people around me who loved me and they thought I was awesome. But again, I had been their support system. And this had been a trait that I had done. I had not, and when I come back to 2013, when I wrote that personal law and I started to look around at the ecosystem around me, I realized that the people that I was creating, I was navigating towards, were again people who were looking at me to support them and not for them to support me. So I've, over the years, have had to have many hard conversations. One of the things of really digging into my ambition, of really understanding what that means for me, and what it means for me to get a message out, or to share messages, or to be in the spotlight in whatever way that it might be, which, by the way, it's very hard still to talk about this in this way, because of course, when we hear people that are ambitious, we tend to think about like, oh, somebody who wants to hog the spotlight or whatever. But it's really not that. It's, you have something to say. You have something to say and you have to get it out there. And I can't be worrying all the time, which I do, about whether or not if I post that, am I going to get 1,001? I'm probably still not as controversial as I could be. Like if I was to really speak certain things, I would be a lot more controversial. But I do still have a little bit of that whole, like, I don't want to be judged and I don't want to be kind of like looked at as somebody who's irrational, and a whole series of other things. But I have had really hard conversations over the years with partners and friends and even family members about not always being there only for them. And I've had to step away from some of them because I realized that all I was doing was giving away my power, giving away myself to put them on the stage. And I still love doing that. By the way, I thought for a long time that my main archetype was like a pillar, but I'm not. I'm a bridge. And so I do love bridging that. And I love taking people from one place to the other. So I will never do things where it's just me. I love the ensemble cast. I absolutely adore. And that was the other piece to realize is I want to be an ensemble. And in an ensemble, we all help each other grow. I don't just support you. I'm not a pillar. And pillars are great, by the way. I think so useful. And I've been a pillar for so many times in my life, and I'm proud of it. But I'm a bridge, and I love being able to be and co-create that stage with you. I want the ensemble cast. I want us all to be helping each other put their message out into the world. And, I let their feedback and the support of the people around me be the fungal network. I won't lie. I lost a lot of friends along the way. But even that became nourishment for the ecosystem because I started to realize that I had built things off of the wrong perspectives. Or I guess I would say even different than losing friends along the way. I would say I recategorize. That sounds so harsh too. I rediscovered relationships, and relationships weren't as binary as I thought that they were. They weren't like just this or that. And I realized that I had been positioning people into different places. Here's the thing. The really big thing that I noticed, that I realized in all of this, was that darkness isn't absence. It's incubation. It's putting something in there with the desire of giving it the space to grow, not forgetting about it. And to do that, I have to really understand my own way of growing, right? What are my cycles? How do I operate? And when am I most useful for myself and for others? And this is again why I say that I still love supporting others. And sometimes I am a pillar. I do hold people up at times in the overall context of being a bridge. I love doing that. And there are seasonal cycles. There's periods where I do that. For example, for my clients, I am there to hold that space. I am there to see you shine. I am co-creating your reality. I am the one that is going to help you make your dreams come true, which has always been one of my mottos. Always been a personal motto of myself is I am here to help others make their dreams come true. But that doesn't mean my dreams don't come true in the process, right? And so I listen very carefully, and I have periods and seasons where, for example, I am just now coming out of a season of really deep support for my clients where like they are front and central. And that is the thing that I'm working on. And now, as I told you, I'm shifting into this, Reconnect with Plankin series, which puts me back on the teaching stage, something I haven't been in. I mean, yeah, of course, inside of the naturally conscious community, I facilitate, but I find that more as a facilitation of things. I haven't taught a lot of classes in the last few years because I've been in a different role. I've been in a different stage of my life, of my growing, of my ambition in a completely different way. And now I'm being pushed more to be that teacher and to be that mentor from the perspective of holding someone as they learn something new and move them through that learning. And so there are many different seasons that we have. I don't know if you remember, but back in episode 83, I told you about how I had learned my own daily productivity and creativity rhythm, right? How I'm most productive in like the early morning, right after I do my morning routine. So I get up and I do my morning routine, which is super important to me. And I have to have that nourishing routine in the morning. And then I'm super productive up until around lunchtime. After lunchtime, I am more about clients and being focused for other people. I don't really do a lot of strategy or anything. I do all of that in the morning. And then super, super, super late at night, I am my most creative. That's when I create content. That's where I get new ideas. That's where everything moves to. And this was something that I discovered by allowing my own body to just do things for a prolonged period of time and just noting down when I was most awake, most productive. I still kind of take early afternoon naps. They're short now, but I still take them. And this is how my creative fire naturally moves. The data for me said bloom at dawn and after midnight and compost in the mid-afternoon. I guess you could think about it in that way, just like many plants do. So many species partly close their stomata, for example, after lunch to conserve water because it's like the super hot. They're not lazy, they're wise. They're using their energy wisely, right? They're using their water resources, their emotions most wisely. And so I align my schedule whether that's writing sprints or, doing kind of super heads down, working with Noelle, the Christmas cactus, to kind of come up with strategy. I have my timing and my rhythm, and I have my seasonal yearly rhythm, like monthly rhythm. I have many different kinds of rhythms that I've been able to listen to. And I think it's really important for you to also listen to that in this work, because if you're going to plant seeds, you want to plant the seeds based on your own rhythm. Don't just do it tomorrow because you listen to this and you got all inspired. That's great. If that feels calling to you, do it. But more importantly, find the rhythm that really works to you, because you need to make sure that you are kind of working with that flow. And also part of that rhythm is not just the rhythm of when you feel like you give the most, but also the rhythm of when you take the most. There are periods of the year when I am very needy. I am needy. I am needy of lots of different things. I might need food. I might need like French. I might need cuddles. I might need like information, like where I read more. All of these sort of cycles are really good for me. I started off the year super pumped about one thing I was learning, and now I'm taking a break from it because I'm realizing that my mind is very in touch with another kind of creative process, and that receiving of information is not the time right now. And so I haven't been working on that, but I will. I'll get back to it, and I feel really comfortable and confident that I will, because again, I'm tapped into that cycle of myself, and another cycle is going to come in the next month or so that is going to propel me back into that learning mode that I need. So I want to finish all of this with a story that leads really right up to this workshop that I've been telling you about and all of this new teaching work that I'm doing. I have a client, we're going to call her Maya, why not, who grew up labeled the black sheep of her family, and being seen felt super unsafe. Super, 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 super unsafe. So when she felt the call as an adult to work on a project that required her to make her presence known in like a very public way, she shelved it completely. She hid her stuff. And Maya was drawn, almost haunted by an idea to introduce a whole grouping of people, a very specific audience, to uh, something that you might say is a little bit more connected to nature in a wooey type of way. Let's just say it that way. But she felt very called, like it was important to get this into and in front of this grouping of people. And this meant that she had to engage with a whole series of other types of people that she just didn't have a relationship with and who didn't feel very comfortable with. Like these are people she had to talk to them in a way that was exposing much more of her creative side rather than her more analytic side and her more logical side, which had been the businesses that she had worked in before. So every time she would think about this, her stomach would clench up. I mean, I remember like every time she would like picture herself having to go and meet with these people and network with these people, like, oh my goodness. I remember her working on different proposals to present to them, and she would just create them and then trash them and create them and trash them. So together we chose a plant ally for her to work with. And Maya sat with that plant. She named her fear, and she asked, like, how do you grow unseen before you grow seen? And really, how do I prepare myself and get myself ready to be able to be seen in this way? And this was not a process that took a day or a month. It took like a year and something, because, Maya was very much in her shell, and we worked tirelessly, like looking at all of these situations, thinking about it from an ecosystem, building out her ecosystem within her family, for example, within her, relations, within the people around her that were most important. And slowly over time, her ecosystem started to change. In NCC, for example, she consistently voiced her dream because she had a trusted group of people, all these sprouts that really were working closely together on our dreams, that co-creation that I was telling you about, that idea that we're on ensemble cast and that we're all kind of up and creating this forest together. And she would read us like the drafts of her proposal, and she would think about, what she wanted to say, and she would present it, and we would give her feedback. And then she would work with her plant to kind of like she felt herself very much in the dark, like trying to grow in the dark. And at some point, she began to contact friends of friends who turned out to be the kinds of people she really wanted to be working with. And so this sort of shadow phase started to emerge, right? She started to come out of that shell that she was in. And the feedback that she would receive, she would take back in and, like, because of course she's still kind of underground in all of this. And she would anchor her confidence in there, and she would let that story kind of go further, and she would go wider into the circle, and friends of friends of friends, and slowly but surely. So rather than just going cold calling, because for her that wouldn't work, she kind of went the route of, I'm going to start to get comfortable enough to tell the people in my ecosystem around me, and I'm going to put out little feelers that there is maybe a wider ecosystem. So she chose to go down that path because that was what allowed her to anchor in her confidence and to move forward. Today, I'm super happy to say that she's actually working in exactly the type of project that she's wanted to work on. She still has her hiccups because it's still like, space and going wider and wider. She's been able to get some really nice feedback and good success of this project. She's had basically confirmation that this is the path for her, that this is the right. And that's what shadow work is in action, right? That plant partner is still there with her on her desk every time she goes to work. And she uses her darkness as a rooting time rather than proof that she doesn't belong or that she shouldn't be doing this, right? She doesn't do it to hide. She does it to root. She does it to explore. She does it to gather up nourishments. And this is what I want for all of you, which is why, again, the next live workshop for Reconnect with Plantkin is plant guided shadow work, right? Where we're going to do exactly this type. We're going to identify one trait or a fear, something you've been trying to prune away, thinking that the way to get through it is to get rid of it. And we're going to partner with the plant to map out its compost path. Like, how do we compost this? How does it become what it needs? How do we take it and break it down into its components so then it becomes something useful to you? And we're going to create a little micro practice that you can do to keep that soil moist and nourished, right? How do we work on the emotional component that holds that space for it? How do we start to create the ecosystem? What does your pot look like and what's inside of it? And so if your body is excited about this, if you're curious, tap that link in the show notes, because this is going to be the place to really get into this darkness through a completely different lens, through the lens of like really warm compost soil loam, like, when you put your hands into the earth and they come out black and you're like, this feels fantastic. Reminds me of all the people that told me that when they're little, they used to eat like really good composty soil. Like that's what they would eat. And they just, and I can see it. I can understand it, that richness of it. So I want you to bring your seed, your fear seed, and we're going to supply soil and mycelium and a circle of fellow sprouts all around you that are ready to tender this dark with you. So in closing, I just want you to remember that the journey we just traced, right? Feed your seed, which is fear as a seed. Feed it rather than, trying to isolate it. This is about nourishing it, nourishing that fear so that it could break down into the parts and we can compost out and take all the nourishment that we can, waiting for this dark living soil that we're creating. Remember, nothing is ever wasted in a forest, nor in us. Everything can be useful when we apply it in the right time and we master its use. And to lean into the scototropism inside of you, anchoring first in the shadow so that you can rise into the light. Feel that darkness as a place of incubation and not of isolation. And the way you do this is by honoring all of your seasonal rhythms as well as your, daily rhythms, basically staying nourished throughout the path. This isn't about drying out. This isn't about trying to kill it. This is the complete opposite. This is about giving lots and lots of space. And finally, remember that, what Maya taught us, that even black sheep stories, right, can bloom when you tend them with your plant friends. In other words, when you take these pieces of yourself that you thought were to be hidden, but instead you share them within a small and trusted ecosystem, then we find the path for them forward. So this is kind of your sign that says, plant me, right? And so what's the perfect next step is for you to join us into this live workshop. plant-guided shadow work, and just to integrate these parts that you keep trying to prune away, but that's not what you're supposed to do. We're going to meet online with, we're going to partner with a living plant, and you're going to use all these practices in real time. And if you're already in Blooming Sprout, by the way, or Flourishing Sprouts inside the Naturally Conscious community, the workshop and every past and future workshop will be there for you. This is the place for you to watch it, or you can just buy it as a one-time offer, and you're going to be able to listen to it for the next 3 months. So you're going to have it there for you for 3 months to experience. So if you're new, tap the link in the show notes and you will be able to register a la carte. Or if you're already in Seedling Sprouts, you can upgrade to Blooming Sprouts. So this is the place where you let your hidden traits meet good compost, safe community, and, I don't know, a dash of plant magic. As always, thank you for spending this little pocket of your day with me and with the quiet, steadfast wisdom of all of our green allies and teachers. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend who's, maybe storing seeds, their own seeds in the cupboard of maybe later. Sorry, we should put a big label on it. Maybe later or never, because, call it out for what it really is. Or you can leave a review. It helps more listeners find this path, and it really extends our reach across all the different platforms. Also, if you want a personal touch, remember, I'm always here. Just book a free tea and plants chat, and the link is again in the show notes. So until next time, keep your roots deep, your canopy open, and your seeds exactly where they belong, in the soil, ready to sprout. Resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'll see you among the sprouts. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.